I have spent years mastering the skill of evaluation and evaluation as it relates to oral speaking, written documents. As an educator, I haven't gone to teachers college and I've done further work in it to try to understand how do we assess issues, how do we assess speech, and I've spent time doing that as an academic. And I want to use that skill now to deal with a matter of evaluating the 2025 budget presentation of Dr. Andrew Holness and Mr. Mark Olin. I'm going to be assessing the budget in terms of one, creativity, two, in terms of newness, and three, in terms of articulations. All right. When I look at the presentation of Mr. Mark Golding, it's clear to me that he had some extremely good thoughts, some good ideas. I think a number of things are still not yet worked out by the People's National Party, and that's understandable because if they are to win the election, then they will go in another few more months, and therefore by that time they would have come up with a final plan, a course of action as what to do, and therefore that understandable they have some more time to get it right if they do have a concretized and comprehensive plan. So in terms of that, I'm going to be assessing based on what is on paper, what currently was articulated. And I'm saying when I listen to Mr. Golding, I'm still thinking that his articulative skills requires much more work. And although he's a lawyer and ought to be more fluent and poised and have that command and that flair which galvanizes one and get your emotion around what he wants to say, that is yet to be desired, unlike other persons in the People's National Party and some of its former leaders as well, particularly Michael, call him Joshua Manley. Now, in terms of newness, I'm not seeing many newness articulated or forwarded by Mr. Golden in terms of his budget presentation. So I'm saying to you, his speech needs to be worked on. I still think that is a part of the lowest thing that in terms of when one is looking at the PMP and selecting a PMP leader, knowing fully well that Jamaica is a charismatic place, particularly the PMP is a charismatic, educated, fluent, flamboyant sort of party that is somewhat established using some of its past leaders and its history to say that this is what the PMP sort of like and mellow. And that is why a Lisa Hanna or a Damian Crawford somewhat resonate with a lot of Jamaicans because they have or are in keeping with what people are accustomed to from a Michael Manley. All right? And Michael Manley clearly is the PMP standard bearer in terms of ethics, in terms of morals, in terms of ideas, in terms of verboseness, in terms of speech, in terms of diction. He is the epitome, the exemplar of what many persons judge political leaders in Jamaica against. No. Having said that, I would give Mr. Golden's presentation based on those three criteria to which I spoke a C plus. I mean, you might say I'm a very hard marker, but let's not transform over to Dr. Andrew Holness. When I look at Dr. Andrew Holness' presentation, a number of things are not new, but were modifications of what currently exists. And those modifications, therefore, should pay dividends, should pay fruits. I was looking for a more robust presentation in terms of putting forward a number of new policies and programs, particularly in keeping with the poor state of education, the poor state of healthcare, the poor state of the public transport sector, the poor state in terms of the economic deprivation of many lives in Jamaica. I thought we would have put in place some programs, some really good initiatives that could address and germinate and therefore galvanize people around his thought. And let's have a competitive 2025 general elections. I thought would have put forward that for me, his budget presentation was more in keeping with what currently exists in terms of the macroeconomic policy and the macroeconomic framework and the social framework in keeping with that macroeconomic framework. It's clear that the GLP is sticking to its that as it relates to a structured, well articulated, well planned macroeconomic plan, and therefore is keeping its let me rephrase that, and therefore it is keeping steadfast to that plan. So when I look at the articulation of Dr. Andrew Holness, I'm saying the articulation is superbly better than previous years. I'm comparing, when I said previous, I'm comparing to when he started and even a year ago budget in terms of his vernacular, the usage of even the jacket paternity slash issue, which is actually currently a debated in well debated thing in Jamaica. He's using the parlance of that, and he did a number of other parlance, which I've gotten people riled up, gotten people actually having some great discussions, and of course ignited Mr. Warmington to be active and to do what he does best, which is to just to articulate his thoughts without much thought. Nevertheless, he was able to do that. When we look at in terms of um those structure of his presentations, we're saying he has it in terms of articulation. I think is a drastic improvement over years before. We look at newness, I'm saying little or nothing new, but in terms of articulation of some of the current policies, and as I said before, it's clear that Mr. Golden and by extension the Jamaica Labour Party is holding steadfast to their current macroeconomic framework, macroeconomic policy, and because they're holding somewhat religiously to that framework, a number of the social programs that I would have wanted were not introduced, and some of the newness that I would have wanted were not placed there, knowing fully well that we have a system that should be dealt with and properly dealt with within the context of where we want to move Jamaica. Now, so he put forward some ideas, and the ideas were great and all of that. So, looking at my total assessment of all of that, no, I would have given Mr. Andrew Ole, Dr. Andrew Ole, sorry, therefore a B. And for me, the budget presentation went to the current Prime Minister of Jamaica, Dr. Andrew Holness, marginally outdoing the budget presentation of Mr. Mark Golding. Those are my views. What do you have to say? I think that I did a fair assessment of what happens. Some person may articulate that the gap was wider. I don't think the gap was wider. And I don't think for one iota of a second that Mr. Mark Golding did any better than Mr. Andrew Holness in terms of presentation, vision, compact messages, newness. That was not the case. The articulation doesn't support the ideas that were placed forward, did not support that he did better. And therefore, for me, within having looked at some of those three criteria automatically looking at, say, the budget presentation for 2025 is awarded to Dr. Andrew Holness for having outperformed his rival of the People's National Party, Mr. Mark Golding. What are your thoughts? Like and subscribe to my channel as I continue to provide with trusted information for you to use to make decisions. I want us to have a discussion. Let's be respectful. Let's have a grand discussion. Looking forward to hear your views.